welcome back to another episode of My Favorite F Words, Football, Fights, and Films. We're back now with a fight-only episode. We're going to do some predictions for the upcoming UFC Jones versus Ovince St. Preux pay-per-view coming up this weekend. Originally, this was going to be Jon Jones rematching Daniel Cormier for the light heavyweight strap that he never lost. He was stripped of after some outside the cage shenanigans, that being his inability to drive or to stick around after having an accident.
Johnny Bones. And
the UFC took his title away. Told him, you're going to have to earn it back. And he took a significant time outside of the cage. They did up this rematch, and Daniel Cormier got himself injured, hurt himself in training, got kind of a weird injury to his lower leg. The connective tissue in between the two bones in the lower leg apparently got some kind of a strain going on there. So we're only going to keep him out apparently like 4 to 6 weeks, but it's enough to derail his training. And, you know, in the case of fighting somebody like Jon Jones, even if you're the champ and he's the challenger,
you still need every advantage you can get.
You want to go in at 100%. So I don't blame Cormier at all for pulling out of the fight. It's unfortunate, but it's not a contract dispute, and it's not wanting to not do promotional material, that's keeping him from having this fight.
Absolutely. And if you're facing an opponent like Jon Jones, you have to absolutely be at your best.
Right. And so instead, the UFC has tagged Ovince St. Preux, ranked number 7 in the division, as the short notice replacement. They said that they had tried a couple of other avenues. They tried Rumble Johnson. He was coming off of some dental work or some dental surgery that was going to prevent him from being able to train and fight on time. And then everyone else was kind of booked up. They said, you know what, we're going to give the opportunity to Ovince St. Preux. He's coming off a win against Fejao. He matches up physically with Jon Jones. And he's healthy. He's willing to go right now. And, from the UFC standpoint, it's providing an opportunity for a guy, but also a very winnable fight for Jon Jones so that they can keep things active and hopefully continue on with their original plans of Jones DC2. But we'll get to that fight. Before that, we've got a host of other fights on the ledger. Before we even get to that, how did you do recapping the previous UFC show?
I missed out on Court McGee. That was my sentimental pick, and that one right there, he was doing so well, and then just got clipped, and it was donezo.
Before, I'm sorry, I didn't preface it, but people might not even know which card we're talking about. The previous card was the UFC Fight Night, Glover Teixeira versus Rashad Evans fight card, and we got most of those fights right. If I'm not mistaken, Chris, you went 7-3 on the night in your picks. Martino, you didn't have such a good night. You went 5-6. I went 9-2 overall in my picks, based on what we talked about on our previous podcast. Now, Chris, you said you picked Court McGee. Didn't work out so well.
Tisha Torres didn't work out, and I'm trying to think of the other one. My other sentimental pick, Michael Chiesa, didn't prove. He kept it up, and
the one we all got wrong was Olawale Bangose.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't even see that fight. I didn't even see it, but I heard it was quick.
On Fight Pass. No, it wasn't quick. In fact, what ended up happening was he essentially won a 10-8 first round, more or less. He came out there like a ball on fire. He dropped Cesar Mutachi Ferreira and just didn't put him away. So he ends up winning the first round really big, gassing out, and I think he got choked out. Or either choked out or lost the decision. But either way, it didn't go well for him, and we all picked him as the lock. If we had one person to put all our confidence in that evening, it was going to be Olawale Bangboshe. You two got picked Muhammad Akhmadov. I picked Zaleski Dos Santos. So you guys were wrong. I was right on that one. Chris and I picked Graves Martino, you picked Brown. Chris and I were right on that one. We all picked John Dodson correctly. We all picked Islam Makhachev. That fight was scrapped, so that one doesn't count.
Yeah.
Martin and I correctly picked Ponzinibbio. Chris picked Court McGee. Chris and I correctly picked Rocky Pennington to beat Betch Correa. Martino picked Betch Correa. Martin and I picked Beneil Dariush to beat Michael Chiesa. We were wrong. Chris picked Chiesa as the sentimental pick, and that one worked out.
Damn it.
Chris and I picked Cub Swanson over Hakron Diaz. We were right. Martino, you were wrong.
God.
Everybody picked Khabib Nurmagomedov to win correctly. Martin and I correctly chose Rose Namajunas over Tisha Torres in a very close fight. And then we all correctly picked Glover Teixeira over Rashad Evans. So not a bad night. It was a little rough for you, but I think you went the other way from us on some close fights.
My
and
DraftKings, I ended up 19th out of 20.
Oh, that's
That's
rough.
brutal.
That is
God.
brutal. But I mean, some of your picks. I mean, we all got Bang Bose wrong. Hakron Diaz went to decision against Cub Swanson. It was never really in doubt, but he was a live dog in that one. Betch Correa against Rocky Pennington. That was a tough fight and a close one at the end. Rocky did what she needed to do. Beneil Dariush getting beat by Michael Chiesa. Chiesa managed to take his back in a split second and sunk in that rear naked choke. But he was getting pieced up the entire time.
Yeah.
Beneil Dariush was on his way, at the very least, to a decision victory and possibly a stoppage before that fight was over. And lo and behold,
I think, and Dariush, I think he was chopping him with the leg kicks, outstriking him, just beating Chiesa on every exchange, every grapple exchange. I mean, he was definitely outclassing Chiesa. He went for that one crazy takedown.
that's all it takes.
Chiesa managed to maneuver himself in one thing, and then as soon as the back was open,
on his ass.
Spun, hooks in, and then he didn't. It wasn't even under the chin. I mean, he was crushing his face, and it was just one of those things where somebody was getting their ass completely whooped, and you make that one mistake, and somebody who won like 90% of his fights are won with rear naked choke. He's gonna get it if he gets the hooks in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. You make a tactical error against a guy that's dangerous and he has that one move in his back pocket. There you go.
Well, it's just like Cody McKenzie. I mean, he couldn't do anything but put somebody in a guillotine.
That McKenzie teen.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't do anything but put him in a guillotine, and if you did anything to defend against it, you had him beat.
All right, well, let's go ahead and start talking about this OSP John Jones card. We'll start from the bottom. We'll do quick picks through the prelims, and then some more in depth on the main card. Starting first fight of the night, you have on Fight Pass Efren Escudero taking on Kevin Lee. Efren Escudero sports a 24-10 overall record, 5-6 in the UFC. 5'9", 155 pounds, 30 years old, fighting out of Fight Lab in Tempe, versus Kevin the Motown Phenom Lee. He's 11-2 overall, 5'9", 155 pounds, 23 years old, fighting out of Triumph MMA. Martin, who do you have winning this one?
I picked Kevin Lee. There's no reason behind it, really. They're both, in 2015, they both went 2-1. So it's pretty evenly matched. But Kevin Lee has a cool nickname. The Motown Phenom.
Chris, who are you picking?
I'm going with Efren Escudero, and it's solely based on his nickname, Hecho en Mexico.
It's Hecho in Mexico. So I guess I'll bring some actual analysis to this.
Yeah, because
we're split. Basically, Efren Escudero is on his third stint in the UFC. He won his season of The Ultimate Fighter with a win over Felipe Nover. In his last four, he's gone on a 2-2 run. He's got wins over Drew Dober and Rodrigo de Lima, but are bookended by losses to Leandro Silva and Leonardo Santos. Both of those guys are 3-0-1 in their last four. So Efren Escudero has never been TKO'd or KO'd, and he's got 13 submissions as a pro. So he's been around for a little while. He's effective enough, but he seems to kind of run into trouble at the UFC level. He, like I said, this is his third stint in the organization. Kevin Lee, on the other hand, he's coming off of a loss to Leonardo Santos, so they have a common opponent there at common loss. He's 4-2 in his UFC run. He's got wins over James Muntasiri, Michael Prazeres, John Tuck, and Jesse Ronson. He lost his debut fight in the UFC to Al Iaquinta. I think he's rapidly improving. He's a superior wrestler and grappler in this particular instance. I see Kevin Lee winning the fight, but I wouldn't be surprised if Efren Escudero, with his experience, would be able to grind out a decision in some fashion. I don't see him knocking out Kevin Lee, even though that's how Lee went down in his last fight. I felt like he got caught there. But, the more likely scenario in my mind is Kevin Lee wears down, scores enough points, and gets enough takedowns that he ends up beating Efren Escudero by decision, as most people who beat Efren Escudero tend to do.
Efren Escudero is the favorite, though.
He is the favorite, and I think that's partly because of his experience, but 5-6 record in the UFC. Kevin Lee's been there half the time and is one win away from Efren Escudero's win total. So that's just my own analysis there. Next fight on the card: Marcos Rogerio de Lima, aka Pesao, taking on Clint Headbusser Hester. Both of these guys are former participants on the Ultimate Fighter TV show. De Lima, 13-3-1. He's 2-1 in the UFC, 0-1 in Strikeforce. 6'1", 205, 30 years old. For Clint Hester, 6'2", 205. He's 29 years old. Fights with out of the Black Zillions camp. He's 11-5 overall, 4-2 in the UFC. Martino.
I don't know too much about either one of them. I do. Clint Hester, I do recognize that name, and I think I've seen him fight once or twice. I really don't know too much.
I think you remember him from his season of The Ultimate Fighter. If
that's
you
probably
saw
what it was.
I like Clint Hester in this fight. Both of them are really heavy-handed. They both win fights by mainly knocking people out. But Clinton Hester is a little bit better wrestling. I think he's gonna do what he can do, take him down if need be. If banging ain't working, then he's gonna take him down and grinding out. But I really don't see this going to a decision with these heavy-handed monsters in the ring. It's just gonna be somebody's gonna get put out early. But I think Clinton Hester's gonna take.
You think Clinton Hester?
Going with Headbusser.
Headbusser. Martin, did you actually make a pick?
No, because I didn't know too much about either one of them.
Okay.
I'll go with Clinton Hester, though.
Okay,
because
so
at least I've seen him fight. He's the one that looks like Lil Wayne. He's like a buff Lil Wayne. That's who it is.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other route here, too. I'm going to go with Pesao. I watched his season of The Ultimate Fighter Brazil. The guy is a huge, huge mountain of a man. He's coming down to 205 after most of his fights being in the heavyweight division. This is his first fight at 205 in 4 years. He doesn't have the best fight IQ, but he has tons of power in his hands and decent boxing. 10 of his 12 victories have come by knockout. He does have a win by TKO over Igor Pokrayats. On the Ultimate Fighter Brazil finale, he has a win over Richardson Moreira, a.k.a. Ricky Monster. He did lose in the Tough House to Antonio Carlos de Zapato, Shoeface.
Shoeface. I love that name.
And he got beat by rear naked choke in his last outing by Nikita Krylov, aka Al Capone. I just, there's reason there to give you pause if you want to pick him over Clint Hester, but Hester is just as many head scratching kind of situations in the cage. He lost his last fight to Vitor Miranda, aka Lex Luthor, and he got TKO'd by Robert Whitaker in a fight of the night performance previously. He's on a 2-fight losing streak after winning 4 straight. He's got kind of this reputation as a knockout artist from absolutely murdering Bristol Morunde with an elbow. But it feels like that's pretty much where it stops for him. He's almost a brawler when it get down to it. He could employ a little bit of wrestling, but I think that this might be a situation where he thinks he's going to be the faster guy in the cage, and is going to choose to stand and bang. And I don't know if that's going to work out to his benefit. So I am going to be picking Pezao in that one. Next fight on the card, you have Walt the Big Ticket Harris against Cody East. Walt Harris is 7-4 overall, 0-3 in the UFC. It's heavyweight, 6'5", 250 pounds, 82-inch reach, 32 years old, training out of American Top Team. Cody East, 12-1. No fights in the UFC thus far. He's 6'3", about 237 pounds, 27 years old, fighting out of Jackson Wink MMA. Chris, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, Cody East was the fighter that Dana found on Looking for a Fight. Mm-hmm. He was on this past episode, and Dana White was impressed, and he was very impressive in that fight. So I think Cody East wins this fight via knockout, and on a 4-fight losing streak, Mr. Walt Harris might be knocked out of the UFC.
Yeah, that is a possibility and quite unfortunate. Cody East comes with a little bit of controversy. He has a background on him that involves allegations of rape, child abuse,
Holy Christ.
And assault. So at 17, he was arrested for sexual assault. In 2007, he was accused of raping a 4'11" girl multiple times, but he was acquitted. A few months later, he was arrested for aggravated assault and child abuse for kicking his mother, stomping his father's head in, and hip-tossing a couple of teenage girls, which resulted in some broken noses and potentially a broken arm.
Jesus Christ. Is he another war machine? What the hell?
Spent 3 years in jail for another assault charge, and then after he got out on that, they put him in jail for another 3 days for violating his probation because he wasn't where he said he was going to be at a certain time. So he's had a lot of run-ins with the law. He hasn't gotten in trouble since 2012, so that's nice.
Oh my Jesus! That's just
if this guy becomes super big, I mean, imagine what he's gonna turn into.
Yeah, you
already have crazy people that aren't that big. Mayhem Miller, that's a prime example right there. Good Lord.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think everybody's entitled to, second chances in life and reform and all of that stuff. I mean, he fought his way into these 12-1 overall. He got discovered on this show. Obviously, the UFC does its background checks and its due diligence on people. So, they're going to bring him in if he does well, and I don't think you'll ever see him in a position to where they're going to be able to promote him very heavily. Yeah. But UFC's heavyweight division needs some bodies. And Walt Harris, on the other hand, he's a pretty fast starter. He's actually got a background playing college basketball. Had some potential to play in the NBA, and he put that on hold to come and fight for a living. I don't know how good his NBA prospects were if he decided he was going to forego guaranteed contract in the NBA for the fight game. He may not be as good as he thought he was.
Yeah.
But at any rate, he's a big guy. He looks like an athlete. At 250 pounds, he's one of the few heavyweights that's shaped like an athlete and not like a big tub of dough. He starts off fast, but he's got a limited gas tank. All 7 of his wins have been by first-round knockout. His offense is better than his defense, though, and that's what happens. He exposes himself when he's striking. and he runs out of gas. His last fight in the UFC was a loss to Soa Palele. His last win was over DJ Lindemann in the Titan FC.
That was a long time ago. Bro.
Yeah, so
no way. I'm going with Cody East.
You going with Cody East?
I'm going with Cody East only because he doesn't have any fights in the UFC, but he's 12-1 in other organizations.
Yeah,
and no fights with that kind of record is better than 3 losses in an elite organization. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have a gas tank. There's no way. There's no way you could fight someone of that caliber with that kind of record and not have a gas tank at all. 12-1 versus no gas? Get out of here.
I think you're right, but for some reason I'm going to go the other way. And maybe it's just I'm going to be looking at it more from the standpoint of Harris is a fast starter. He lost to Jared Rochold, but he plunked him early in the fight. And Rochal's just super tough and went to his wrestling, which ultimately allowed him to control the entire rest of that fight. But if Harris can get off a big shot early, and if Cody East is suffering any kind of octagon jitters whatsoever, this could be a one and done in the division for him. You know, he'd be on a short leash with his background, and he's going to need to either win or look impressive in losing in order to stick around. So I just think Walt Harris, I've seen him fight a handful of times. I kind of go with the devil I know versus the devil I don't. So I'm picking Harris here. Next fight, Glyco Franca versus James Vick.
The Texecutioner.
Franca is 13-3 overall, 1-0 in the UFC. 25 years old. James Vick, the Texecutioner, is 8-0 overall, 4-0 in the UFC. 6'3", 155 pounds, 29 years old, fighting out of Team Lloyd Irvin. Who do you pick on this fight?
This one was tough. While James Vick has a better record, he's a heavy decision guy. I don't know. I'm gonna probably have to go opposite of James Vick.
You're gonna go opposite?
Yeah.
So you're gonna go Glyco Franca. Okay.
He's a submission machine, and I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah, he does have. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. He's a very dangerous prospect. He's never been KO'd. Of his 13 wins, 6 are by KO, TKO, 6 by submission, and 1 decision. So he's pretty well rounded in his methods to victory. Chris, who are you picking in this fight?
I'm going with James Vick.
You go with Vick?
Yeah, I'm going with James Vick. I just feel, I don't know, with Franca, I haven't seen him in the ring, but I've watched James Vick fight, and he fights a really smart fight. So I'm thinking he's gonna rely on his submissions and his ability to get the decision.
Yeah, that's good observation. Franca got into the UFC with a win in his season at Tough Brazil over Fernando Bruno, which is a pretty good win. But most of the records of his opponents that he's beaten, there are a lot of losing records out there. So I don't know how high the level of competition he's been fighting has been. James Vick, he's undefeated in the UFC. He did lose to Michael Chiesa in the Tough House, which doesn't go on your record, but we have seen him taste defeat in the past. He's been a little bit of a prospect killer. 3 of his 4 UFC wins were the first UFC loss for his opponent. So he's got some excellent chokes, but he does tend to be a little bit of a slow starter, and he has some holes in his range game. For a guy that's 6'3", he can get hit. You know, he doesn't use his range like somebody that tall. Franca has a really nice clinch game, which is unfortunate for him when he's fighting a tall guy,
yeah.
who doesn't like to use his range. Yeah, you get in close against James Vick, he's got some nasty elbows and uppercuts that he likes to use, and he's so long and lanky. You get a hold of him, he's been able to slip on that guillotine. He did it to Jake Matthews at the Mark Hunt Stipe Miocic fight, and that earned him a Performance of the Night bonus. He can get down on the ground and find a way to slap on a triangle or catch you in a rear naked or a submission or a guillotine. So I'm going to pick James Vick here as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if Franca was able to get to him. I think he's a pretty good prospect, and we haven't seen enough of him to really know if he's legit or if he's going to be another one of these guys that flames out after winning the Ultimate Fighter. The next fight on the card, Carla Cookie Monster Esparza versus Juliana Jutai Lima.
Yeah.
Esparza's 10-3 overall. She's only 1-1 in the UFC, but before that she was 3-0 in Invicta. She also has an 0-2 record in Bellator. She stands 5'1", 115 pounds, 28 years old, fighting out of Team Oyama. Lima is 10-2 overall. She's 2-1 in the UFC, 0-1 in Invicta. 5'5", 115 pounds, 34 years old, fighting out of Gracie Barra Draculino team. Martino, what do you think?
I am going with Lima.
You're going to go with Juliana Lima.
I'm going with Lima.
And
the
why
thing is, they both lost to the champ. The only advantage that Lima has is that Esparza is coming off a loss, and she's recovering from, I think it's shoulder.
She did have shoulder surgery.
Mm-hmm. So that right there, I mean, granted, you got a pass test to get back into the ring, but it's still an injury, whether it's old or whatever. So that's a point against her in my books, because someone can exploit that and it's over.
Chris, what do you think?
You know what, Carla, I really like. I like her wrestling ability. She, she's really good at, getting the takedown and this, that, and the other. However, watching the Jędrzejczyk fight, it was just, her striking was just
she got mollywopped.
Yeah, she looked so lost in the ring that it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. I want to pick Cookie Monster. Juliana Lima, she's got a win streak going on. She has knocked people out before. I'm gonna go with Carla. I'm gonna stay with Carla. I think that hopefully in the year that she's been off, she's worked on the holes in her game, and I would say she's gonna win via decision. It's not gonna be a knockout or anything like that. It's gonna be a decision.
Okay. Well, I think Carla Esparza has a very strong wrestling game. She's shown that. Her striking is a little bit on the questionable side. But she does have plenty of experience against higher level fighters. Though from watching her on the Ultimate Fighter TV show, she does have some confidence issues, which is surprising to me as somebody that has held a championship. I mean, she beat Rose Namajunas pretty handily. She worked her wrestling. She ended up getting Rose in a rear naked choke to win the strawweight title. She also has a decision victory over Beck Rollins in Invicta, where she won their title. Her losses, all of her losses, are to the best fighter in the division in the world at that time. She lost to Megumi Fuji when Megumi Fuji was the best strawweight fighter in the world in Bellator. She lost to Jessica Aguilar when Jessica Aguilar was the best, had taken over the mantle from Megumi Fuji as the best strawweight fighter in the world. And then once she got up to being the champion in the UFC, she loses to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who has solidified herself right now as the best female fighter in the world at that weight class. So her losses are not to slouches. She's beaten everybody else that she's come up against, despite her confidence issues, despite her questionable striking. On the flip side, Juliana Lima is primarily a wrestler, so you got wrestler versus wrestler. This could be really good and result in a striking matchup, or it could be
Really boring.
really boring.
Yeah.
And when I think back to the days of early MMA, when you got two people who were primarily wrestlers and didn't have a whole lot of striking acumen, it was a coin flip whether those fights were going to be great or were going to be really, really terrible. I think this could be one of those really, really terrible fights. Juliana Lima is coming in on a 2-fight win streak after losing in her UFC debut to Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She also lost to the scale in that fight. She missed weight for that fight.
Yeah, she did.
I think
Sure enough.
she's finished and gotten that together. The telling stat for me in trying to pick this one, Juliana Lima has never won a fight in the United States. She's 10-2. All 10 of her victories come in Brazil, and both of her losses are on American soil.
Wow, I didn't even notice that. I
So,
did not notice that.
I'm going. I don't know if she just has a problem if she's out of her comfort zone when she fights outside of Brazil, or she hasn't figured out how to train in another environment. But I
She
just
better
started
get used
looking
to
at
it.
it, and every one of those victories, Carla Esparza is a tough cookie, quote unquote, to be fighting when outside of your comfort zone. So I'm going to pick Carla Esparza here.
Do you think she gets a little bit of ring jitters on her return? Any little bit of nerves?
I think she's shown that she's susceptible to that by all means. Yeah, definitely. That being said, I think she's probably coming out there with something to prove. I think she let the jitters get to her, and that's why she lost the title in the first place. At this point, she's just excited to get back in there and do her thing.
I hope she is.
Next fight on the card, Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts against Dominic Nonstop Action-Packed Steel. Danny Roberts is 12-1 overall, 1-0 in the UFC. 6 foot tall, 170 pounds, 28 years old, fighting out of Next Generation UK. Dominic Steele, 20-6 overall, 1-1 in the UFC. 6 foot tall, 170 pounds, 28 years old, fighting out of Team Vision. Martin?
I'm going with who did I pick? Danny Roberts. I am going with Danny Roberts. 1, because of his record, and 2, because of the way he got his record. He's not a decision guy. I mean, he has 1 or 2, but everything else has been submission, knockout, submission, knockout. Like, it's... On the other hand, I don't even know what the guy's name is.
Dominic Steele?
Yeah, he's a decision machine when he wins. He's a decision machine. His last fight, he slammed the crap out of somebody and knocked him out. But that's about as impressive.
Yeah, that's
for
about
him.
it. Chris, what do you think?
I was looking at this fight, and Dominic Steele has that impressive slam against Dong Young Kim.
Yeah, he has a slam victory over not that Dong Young Kim.
But not the stun gun, just the guy named Dong Young Kim.
Yeah, apparently, who knew that there was more guys out there than named Dong Young Kim, and both of them wanted to be fighters in the UFC.
Yeah. I was gonna go that way just because that was a pretty beast mode slam. But Danny Roberts, just looking at his record, looking at his submission game, his
shit's impressive, right?
Yeah, it's very impressive. And his last loss was 2011. I mean, the guy, and he fights. You looking at his art. He stays active. So I'm with you. I'm gonna go with Danny Roberts.
Okay, well, the first time on this entire panel, we are in agreement. I'm also picking Danny Roberts. Roberts, he's got 5 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 2 decisions. So he's pretty well rounded in his method of finish. But his real strength is boxing. He's got good speed and footwork. He covers a lot of ground really fast, so he can close the distance on a guy pretty quickly. He's got a little bit weaker in the defensive wrestling standpoint, which is where Steele will probably look to get him. Steele is a grinder in pretty much every way. He does have tremendous work rate. The guy will continue to come forward. He'll throw punches. He'll attempt takedowns, and he's not going to stop. He's got cardio. He'll keep going, keep going, and keep going. But Danny Roberts is shown the ability to work off of his back. He doesn't get flustered by being put in those kind of situations, and he's very opportunistic with his submissions. And in his lone UFC bout, he submitted Nathan Coy with a brilliant triangle. And that was on the Namajunas Van Zant card. So I am picking Danny Roberts. Dominique Steele, he's shown he can be knocked out. He's been knocked out 4 times so far in his career. So that's just a bad precedent to set. I think Hot Chocolate continues his winning ways. Next fight on the card, Sergio Pettis against Chris Kalidas. Sergio Pettis, the brother of Anthony Pettis, they call him the Phenom. He's 15-2, 4-2 in the UFC. 5'6", 125 pounds, just 22 years old.
Yep.
Chris Kalidas, on the other hand, the Greek assassin they call him, 9-2 overall, 2-1 in the UFC. He's 5'7", 125 pounds, 35 years old. Martin, do you have a pick on?
Yes, I'm going with Pettis. 1, you don't ever go against the Pettis. 2, he's got age and experience as an advantage. I mean, age being that he's younger, and he's got more fights in the UFC. And Kalidas, I mean, he doesn't have experience, not in the UFC, not with UFC caliber fighters, anyways. And he's hitting that age to where like it's almost time for you to leave. You know what I mean? Like
you've seen what he can do. You see what he can do. He's 35. He's not going to all of a sudden develop a new skill set.
Yeah.
In that time frame. So I get it. So you're picking Sergio Pettis, Chris?
Yeah, I'm going with Sergio again. Too. I think being younger, he's going to be younger. He's going to be faster. The striking that the Pettis boys have is really good. I like Sergio in this, which I think is surprising because remember Anthony said he wasn't going to fight on the same card as his brother.
Yeah, I think money talks at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And when you're no longer the champion, you're coming off a 2-fight losing streak. You get on whatever card they tell you. You no longer the champion. But Sergio, 22 years old, he's already got 6 fights in the UFC. Where is his ceiling? You know, do you think he's going to continue to get better, or have we seen in 6 fights the Sergio we're going to see for the rest of? For the foreseeable future. Some guys plateau, and some guys continue to develop.
I'm hoping he gets better because I want to see him put together a nice, impressive win streak.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he got 2. He got back to back, then he got a loss, then he got a win. I want to see him, and he lost to Alex Caceres, which Alex is great.
Bruce Leroy's no slouch.
He's no slouch, but I wouldn't necessarily call him elite.
Yeah.
I think him being 22 years old, he's still learning so much, and it all depends on where his head is going to take him. Because a lot of times with a lot younger fighters, their heads can go either way.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, and that speaks to the note that I wrote down. I said that being Anthony Pettis' brother has kind of brought on expectations that might have been a little too high, a little too soon. He's actually more technical a fighter than Anthony Pettis, but sometimes he lacks a little bit of focus. He can get caught napping by fighters that tend to push the pace, and he can be dropped. So I would expect him to fight a smarter fight. That's one of those things that comes with experience and comes with age, is the ability to step back and not fight too emotional, not make silly mistakes, and not take time off in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
When you're young, you think you can get away with that kind of stuff. Sage Northcutt, stuff like that. On the other hand, Chris Kalidas, the Greek assassin, is actually Canadian. I'm sure he has Greek roots, which is why
maybe he really did kill a Greek.
But yeah, he started his UFC career with a fight of the night win over Paddy Houlihan. He lost by Kimura to Ray Borg, and then he had a split decision win over Chris Beal his last time out. In a fight in Canada. Dun, 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 dun. He fights at a high pace, but he's pretty sloppy. He tends to leave himself open on aggressive punches and takedown attempts. But he does settle down a little bit later in the fight. So does he suffer from nerves at the beginning and then kind of get into his rhythm? I don't know, but I don't know if this will uh, be one of those fights where he's going to have the luxury of being able to settle down. I think Pettis is going to get out in front of this one and score points or control this fight in pretty much every phase and cruise to a decision victory. Next on the fight card, Yair Rodriguez versus Andre Touchy Feely.
Feely.
Rodriguez is 6-1, 3-0 in the UFC. 5'11", 145 pounds, 23 years old, fighting out of Ragnarok MMA. Andre Feely, 18-3 overall, 3-2 in the UFC. 5'11", 145 pounds, 25 years old, fighting out of Team Alpha Male.
Some alpha male guys. You know, they do stuff really well. They're really well grounded with their wrestling. They definitely know how to slap on a guillotine. And also, I mean, Touchy Feely.
You like his nickname?
I like that. I like the nickname.
Martin?
I actually went with Touchy Feely first, but I think I'm switching to Yair Rodriguez. I'm actually taking a look at it, and Rodriguez's win consistency, albeit he's a big decision machine. What is up with all these decision machines? Him being a decision machine, but his wins are consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that worries me, God, I don't know, man. I'm gonna stick with Rodriguez.
Okay, so you're picking Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Rodriguez is a former Ultimate Fighter winner. He has he won his season of Ultimate Fighter Latin America with a unanimous decision victory over Leonardo Morales. His last time out was a unanimous decision win over Daniel Hooker. He's a skilled fighter, and even though he doesn't have the stoppages under his belt, he does take a lot of risks for the sake of being exciting. He's got Fight of the Night bonus for his split decision victory over Charles Rosa in his second UFC outing. And the only loss on his ledger was by KO in December of 2012. But he followed that up with a 13-second flying knee victory less than 2 months later. So my question there is, what's up with these Mexican commissions? You know, that let a guy get knocked out and then fight again less than 60 days later.
I mean,
he must have passed a concussion protocol, but that's just weird to me.
That's a different sanction right there.
Yeah. Touchy Feely alternated wins and losses since joining the UFC. Notably, he was caught in a flying triangle by Godofredo Pepe, and he was guillotined by Max Holloway.
Ooh.
So he did win his last fight out by head kick and punches over Gabriel Benitez. He's very talented, but he's also very inconsistent. In his UFC debut, he missed weight, but he did win the catchweight fight at 148.5 pounds. So you can kind of chalk that up to the first time out, maybe not quite getting the weight cut right. It's weird that a guy fighting out of a camp like Team Alpha Male would miss weight.
Yeah,
that's a team full of wrestlers. To me, that speaks to maybe his discipline a little bit. He's an emotional fighter. He can tend to lose focus in fights sometimes, and that can be his undoing. I just think Yair Rodriguez is going to fight a cleaner fight. This could go either way. It's a bit of a coin flip, but I'm going to take Rodriguez here. Next fight on the card, Robert the Reaper Whittaker against Rafael Sapo Natal. Robert Whittaker's been fighting in the UFC since winning his season of Tough Smashes at the welterweight weight class. He fights out of PMA Super Martial Arts. Rafael Sapo Natal, 21-6-1 overall, 9-4-1 in the UFC. Just 33 years old, 6 foot tall, fights out of the Renzo Gracie Academy. Coming off a 4-fight, both guys are coming off of 4-fight win streaks, and both guys have victories over Uriah Hall. So that's the commonalities there. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the path to victory?
I picked Robert Whittaker. And it was tough for me to do that because I do like Natal. But I picked Whitaker because of his record, and I think age plays a factor. I mean,
Yeah, there's just 8-year difference in age.
I mean, that's a big difference. I can understand if he was like, oh, this is 25 and he's 27, but one's 20 and one's in his 30s. That's two different ball games right there.
Yeah. Chris?
Originally, I wanted to pick Rafael Natal only because he's been around for a while and seeing a familiar face. But Robert Whitaker, he's on the rise. He's an excellent striker. Natal, in order to win this fight, he has to get in and get dirty, and drag him down and just fight a really close clinch, cut off the cage, push him up and press him. But on a striker like Whitaker, I just don't see it happening. I think Whitaker's just gonna go
Good call.
Beast mode and might shut the switch off.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Whitaker is on a 4-fight win streak after starting his UFC career at 2-2. He had knockout victories over Brad Tavares and Clint Hester, and his last victory was that unanimous decision over Uriah Hall. He moved up to the middleweight division for his fight against Clint Hester, and it turned out to be the best move he could have made. It seems like he's found more power at middleweight, and his chin is a whole lot better. I mean, when he was fighting down at welterweight, he was getting rocked by people who don't traditionally have a whole lot of power.
And that due to dehydration. Your brain ain't got no moisture.
Yeah, it rattles around inside your skull. At 185, you've seen his chin be dramatically improved. I've seen him take shots that would have knocked out 170-pound him twice over. But he's a really dangerous striker. He's got quick and heavy hands and excellent timing. He uses his kicks to control distance and set up his punches. I feel like I remember seeing him in one fight used at Cuban-style boxing with the shoulder roll.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it was a while back though, and I don't think that worked out well for him in that particular fight. But that being said, he does have some boxing skill, and he's a pretty decent defensive wrestler. Sapo Natal is experienced against good fighters. He's a BJJ black belt, but he's not as fast as Whitaker. So he has to use his movement and jabs to kind of chip away at distance and set up that takedown. He's been known to leave himself open after throwing exchanges. If he can get you to the ground, his ground game is smothering. He's willing to fight ugly to work towards that decision or to work towards a submission. I think he has potential to make this ugly, but Whitaker is skilled enough and fast enough to keep Sapo off of him. I find myself picking Whitaker probably 7 times out of 10 for this matchup. So it's another unanimous choice across the board, with Robert Whitaker being everyone's pick.
This is becoming scary.
Next fight, Anthony Showtime Pettis against Edson Jr. Barbosa. This could be the fight of the night, the year, whatever.
Absolutely.
This is going to end up being my hardest choice.
So this one has potential for some fireworks. Anthony Pettis, 22-4. He's 5-3 in the UFC and 5-1 in the WEC. So he's got an overall record of 10-4 in the Zuffa banner. Edson Barbosa, 28-3 overall, 10-4 in the UFC. So fighting for the Zuffa organization, they've got essentially the exact same records. Pettis, 5'10", 155 pounds, 72-inch reach, 29 years old, fighting out of Rufus Sport. Barbosa, 5'11", 155 pounds, 75-inch reach, 30 years old, fighting out of Ricardo Almeida, BJJ. Martin, you said this was a tough pick for you.
This is tough. Barbosa is a killer. His kicks, his speed, and everyone always refers back to it. He has one of the most grossest knockout wins on Evan Dunham. He kicked him so hard, his body stiffened up instantaneously.
You're thinking Terry Edom.
Terry Edom.
Terry Edom.
Terry Edom.
That's the highlight. That's where he turned him into a lamppost and knocked him over. Yeah, that is going to be a permanent highlight in the UFC's archives. It's beautiful. It's up there with the same knockouts that you see from Rashad Evans kicking Sean Salmon, Edson Barbosa spin kicking Terry Edom.
And it was just beautiful.
It was absolutely great. Perfect form. He completely extended that foot. Everything is straight lines, just as picture perfect as you can get. You couldn't CGI a better looking kick than that.
But the problem here is that Sergio's coming back with a lot of pressure. Huh?
You mean Anthony?
Anthony. Why am I looking at... Anthony's coming back with a lot of pressure on him that he's probably given to himself because he really needs this win because he wants to make that run again for his title. He's flashy. He's fast. He's got that Taekwondo background. So it's gonna be a kick fest. Like, it's definitely gonna be a kick fest, and I am going for Pettis.
You're gonna go with Anthony Pettis.
Absolutely.
Okay, Chris, what do you think?
I really it sucks when you like both fighters.
Uh-huh.
That's like the worst is when you like them both. I feel that this fight has the potential to be fight of the night. I think we're going to see a lot of really high level striking.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think Anthony Pettis scared me when he fought Rafael dos Anjos because he looked lost in that fight.
Uh-huh.
I thought he almost might have didn't have the fire. Then in the Eddie Alvarez fight, the first 2 rounds, he almost was like, do I really want to get in this? And then he started late.
Uh-huh.
So
too little, too late.
Exactly. And I think that he's got that. I'm hoping that he's going to have a renewed passion because when he's on his game, he is an excellent fighter to watch. Edson Barbosa, he's fun anytime you watch him. I think Anthony Pettis is going to have the drive to take this for the win.
All right, so 2 picks for Anthony Pettis. I think Pettis is the most inventive, or has the most inventive offense in the UFC. He's got laser accuracy. We saw it in his Showtime kick to Benson Henderson, where he jumped off the cage. He had a head kick KO of Joe Lozon, a body kick TKO on Donald Cerrone.
Ooh, yeah.
And he's got submission chops as well. I mean, he took the title from Benson Henderson with an armbar. But we saw the blueprint to beat him, or we thought we saw the blueprint to beat him when he got beat by Clay Guida. And that being to wrestle him to death. But in his last 2 fights, he essentially got outstruck. I mean, Rafael dos Anjos beat him on the feet. Totally beat him on the feet.
Badly, too.
Eddie Alvarez made a conscious decision to not wrestle him. And he wanted to keep that fight standing for as long as he could. I don't think that's the smartest thing that Alvarez could have done, to be perfectly honest. Watching Eddie Alvarez, who's been dropped in almost every fight I've ever seen him in, to stay standing against a guy like Anthony Pettis would be counterintuitive, but it worked for him. He won a split decision. So, it turns out that Anthony Pettis' kryptonite is pressure fighters, not wrestling. He desperately needs this win, though, to stay relevant. A 3-fight losing streak for him would be pretty devastating. They'd probably have to take all those Wheaties boxes off the shelf. He hadn't won a fight since he got put on the Wheaties box.
Do you think if he loses, are there any implications, do you think? Do you think they give him the...
I don't think so. I think they move him down the card. I think they give him some competition that's a little outside. But you look at his last 3 losses. He lost the title fight. You can't fault a guy for that. He loses fights in the main event and loses a split decision, which could have gone either way. And people, depending on your perspective, you could have said that he actually won that fight. So he could be coming off of a win and not a loss. Instead, he's facing down potentially a 3-fight losing streak. Yeah. So I don't think he's in any danger of getting cut. He's still one of the most exciting guys out there, and all you got to do is put him in against a scrub to let him get a victory. And if he loses this fight, you'll be more than justified in doing so. Edson Barbosa, we talked about his highlight over Terry Edom. He's also a dynamic striker. He's got 6 post-fight bonuses in his career with the UFC. So I do have some questions about his heart, his durability, and his fight IQ. Against Jamie Varner was a fight that he should have blown through, and Varner took it to him and ended up beating him in a fight that was just a head scratcher at the end of the day. But he, like I was saying about Pettis' kryptonite, Varner just brought the pressure, and Barbosa didn't know what to do with it, and ended up crumpling on it. He's 3-3. Barbosa's 3-3 in his last 6. His losses, though, were against Tony Ferguson, Michael Johnson, and Donald Cerrone. His wins come over Paul Felder, Evan Dunham, and Bobby Green. So there's a smattering there. Bobby Green's not a slouch. Evan Dunham's pretty good. Paul Felder's all right. But the upper echelon guys,
I was about to say,
Tony Ferguson, Michael Johnson, Donald Cerrone, every one of those guys has been at the top of their division. Anthony Pettis falls in that same category, and I don't know if it's necessarily the best thing for Edson Barbosa as far as trying to pick him as a potential winner here. On the that being said, this could be the first time we've ever seen Anthony Pettis staring up at the lights. If Barbosa hits the right the right kick, the right strike, he's not going to do it with his hands, but he's certainly capable of doing it with his fists or with his feet. I don't think it's going to happen, though.
I'm about to say, if he hits Pettis with that wheel kick again.
I think Pettis gets back on the winning track. Neither one of these guys is in any danger of getting cut. It could be a fight of the night situation where both of them come home with some extra checks. But
I'm sure.
I think Pettis gets back on the winning track here. 2 more fights on the card, our co-main and our main event. So we're almost to the end of the road here. Our co-main event, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson against Henry Cejudo. Mighty Mouse is 23-2-1. He's got a record in the UFC of 11-1-1. WEC record of 2-1. So he's got plenty of fights under the Zuffa banner. Henry Cejudo is 10-0 in his MMA career, 4-0 in the UFC. Both guys are fighting at 125 pounds and have a 64-inch reach and are 29 years old. Henry Cejudo is 1 inch taller at 5'4". Demetrius at 5'3". Johnson fighting out of AMC Pancration. Henry Cejudo fighting out of the Fight Ready camp. What do you think of this one?
I think this is going to be Mighty Mouse's first real
test.
This could be his first real threat to his title. I mean, this is the first time we're going to see, Mighty Mouse go up against an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. Also, Cejudo's a bigger guy. I want to see how the weight cuts is going to affect his cardio, because Mighty Mouse will tend to push the pace and will win on points, bring it to the later rounds. And we all know Mighty Mouse's cardio is just amazing. So hit 5 rounds for him, no problem. Cejudo, who tends to have trouble making weight, I want to see how this weight cut might affect his cardio. But I can't bet against Mighty Mouse, man. He's so good. He's so fast. I don't think he's going to try and keep it on his feet. I think he might try to take it down, which against a wrestler is going to be interesting. But I think Mighty Mouse might use his jiu-jitsu to take the victory.
Okay. Tino.
I picked Mighty Mouse also. While Cejudo is a great wrestle boxer, that's just what he is, a wrestle boxer. His fighting it's choppy. Like, you have to go in, hit, strike, reset, drop, level change. While Johnson, I wish I could explain your analogy of the capoeira martial arts.
About learning a language.
Exactly. Cejudo is that initial stage where you just learn certain phrases and you can communicate enough to get by.
Sure.
Johnson, on the other hand, is a natural-born linguist in that language. Like his movement is so fluid that he can go right from a punch to a knee he knows how to connect everything together. So there's not a situation that he does not know how to get out of.
Right.
And that's where I see all the advantages weighing for him. I mean, I love Cejudo, and I do want to see someone that's an underdog come up and win. I just don't see it. Not against Mighty Mouse.
Yeah. And to bring up the analogy that you had referenced as far as languages, learning when you come into mixed martial arts and you have a primary discipline, you're trying to build upon that and incorporate those other phases into your game. And Henry Cejudo is an Olympic gold medalist. He's the youngest in wrestling history. So he has the wrestling game down as good as it can be. But you add the boxing game, you add the kicking game, you add the grappling game, the submissions to that, and it's almost like learning a foreign language. In that respect, he has learned a handful of phrases and can get by in the cage. He can get his point across. He can get his message across because he's learned a handful of phrases and he's getting better at that. It's stringing those words and phrases together to make sentences. Mighty Mouse Johnson, on the other hand, is totally fluent in every language that MMA has. Grappling, striking, wrestling. He can change levels in his wrestling. He can set up the wrestling with his strikes. He's got the latest submission in championship fight history in the UFC. 4 minutes and 59 seconds into the 5th round, submits Kyoji Horiguchi.
Crazy.
He's beaten everybody in the division, some of them twice. Beaten John Dodson twice, Joe Benavidez twice. He has a win and a draw with Uncle Creepy Ian McCall. He beat Miguel Torres when Miguel Torres was still one of the highest ranked highest ranked flyweights in the world. Actually, not even flyweights. I think he was a bantamweight at the time because they didn't have the flyweight division. And he won his UFC debut against Kid Yamamoto. His last loss was to Dominic Cruz, and it was a decision loss at bantamweight before there was a flyweight division. So he couldn't even fight in his natural weight class. He had to fight a weight class above where he's comfortable just so that he could fight.
Yeah.
And he went to decision against Dominic Cruz, who is arguably the best fighter at 135 pounds. So Mighty Mouse is the fastest fighter on the UFC roster. He's got unlimited cardio and confidence. Power, submissions, we said all of that. He's ranked the number 2 fighter in pound for pound in the world for a reason. And he does everything well. He listens to his corner. It's like his corner has a video game controller. And they say, Mighty Mouse, throw a spin kick. They hit the B button. He throws a spin kick. They say, Mighty Mouse, take him down. They hit the shoulder buttons and spin the controller. And he goes for a takedown. I mean, he does exactly what his corner asks him to do instantly. It's like a little robot in there that they're controlling. Yep. And he's got a tremendous fight camp that knows exactly what he needs to be doing to help guide him along. I think Cejudo's just in over his head here. It's a hell of a jump in the level of competition to go from fighting a split decision win over Chusier Formiga to fighting for the title against the most dominant flyweight of all time. He's not lacking in confidence, and I don't think he's going to be lacking in cardio either. Being an Olympic gold medalist and being primarily a wrestler, I think he's going to have the cardio. I think his weight cutting issues are not going to be as much of an issue anymore. He's kind of gotten that under control, but he has not finished a fight since he got into the UFC. All of his decisions he's coming off 6 straight decisions. So it's been a while since he's found a way to.
What does that tell you about a fighter?
I don't know necessarily. I don't look at decisions in a bad way per se, because it shows that a guy can go full 15 minutes, full 25 minutes. That he's able to withstand adversity for long periods of time. He doesn't. It means he fights smart enough to not put himself in a bad position and get himself knocked out, choked out.
Does that tell you that he's a safe? That he fights safe?
Not necessarily.
Cautiously?
Some guys are just hard to put away. You look at the level of competition. Look at guys that are constantly going to decision. GSP went to a decision a lot towards the end of his career. People want to say he was fighting safe, but he was also fighting some killers.
Yeah.
He was fighting some
top-tier
tough guys. And sometimes it's just hard to put people away.
Yeah.
It's just a reality of the situation, Not everybody can be Anderson Silva and have 14 stoppages in the UFC. It's just the way the game kind of shakes out. So decisions, not inherently a bad thing. You kind of have to watch how the fights play out. Some dudes do fight safe on occasion or every time out. Other guys, are going for broke and just for one reason or another just can't put their opponents away, either because the opponents are tough or they're just not getting the
right connection,
on their punches or the opportunities for submission. So I have Mighty Mouse Johnson winning this as well. Long story short, finally come to the end of the night. Main event: John Jones fighting Vince St. Preux for the interim 205-pound title. Johnny Bones Jones, 22-1 overall, 15-1 in the UFC, 6'4", 205 pounds, 84.5-inch reach. He's 28 years old, fighting out of Jackson's MMA. OSP, 19-7 overall, 7-2 in the UFC, 7-1 Strike Force. 6'3", 205 pounds, 80-inch reach, 33 years old, fighting out of the Knoxville Martial Arts Academy. We already talked about it at the beginning. Jones was stripped of his title last year for some out-of-cage stuff. It's on a 12-fight winning streak. The only loss on his ledger is a loss to Matt Hamill by disqualification for throwing some 12-6 elbows.
It's so dumb.
Vince St. Preux is 7-2 since joining the UFC. His last time out, he defeated Rafael Feijão Cavalcante, and prior to that, he had a rear naked choke loss to Glover Teixeira. How do you see this one playing out?
John Jones is going to poke him in the eye a bunch of times and then choke him out.
They said he's been working on his jiu-jitsu.
John Jones he's super talented, and he's going to create space. And like I said, he's going to do that pawing technique right at, fighters' eyes. He's going to poke OSP in the eye a couple times. OSP's not going to have an answer for it. And he's going to either knock him out or choke him out.
The two things I notice about this fight, or these fighters, is OSP fights wide open. Like, he fights open and recklessly, which leaves him a lot of openings to be exploited, while Jones is really calculated, really closed up, really technical. I think the experience and this wave, he's riding this wave.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gonna knock him out. I really believe he's gonna knock him out within the first 2 rounds. I really believe that.
Jones has pretty much shown that only John Jones right now can beat John Jones. The question is, does he beat himself? Is he looking past Vince St. Preux towards his fight with Daniel Cormier?
I'm hoping.
Is ring rust going to be a factor? Does he try something that's outside of what he would normally do, just to either try and look flashy or just test himself out and say, oh, you know what, I haven't thrown this kick before. Let me give this a shot. End up slipping on a banana peel and catching himself in a guillotine. There's so many things that could go wrong for him if he doesn't fight a smart fight. That said, he has every tool in the toolbox to beat Vince St. Preux, aside from the fact that he's fighting a 6'3", 205-pound man. who used to play football for the University of
Yeah.
Tennessee. Ovin St. Preux has shown he can get beaten by decision, by knockout, and by submission. By decision, submission, or by knockout. He's lost every way that you can lose. He's 19-7, but he's also very dangerous. He knocked out.
Cummings?
Patrick Cummings. He's got and Shogun, so he's got knockout power in his hands and that ability to counter. He beat Shogun stepping away, stepping back and throwing that counter punch, and it put Shogun's lights completely out.
Yeah.
Now Shogun, you could say, is a shot fighter, but he still landed the punch. He's got pretty decent wrestling, but he can get frustrated by better grapplers. We saw that happen against Ryan Bader. We saw that happen against Gegard Mousasi. And John Jones is an excellent wrestler. He's got JUCO credentials. He does have some submission ability against kind of lower level guys. He beat Nikita Krylov with a Von Flue choke, which you shouldn't ever see.
I don't even know what that is.
At the highest levels.
Cool.
I'll show you when we end this podcast, but it's a lower level thing. He should be able to get out of it. You don't see it very much on the pro levels of MMA. You see it more on the regional scene and the amateur scene. And he beat Ryan Jimmo with a Kimura, and part of that was just outsizing Jimmo and getting him down. He's been around a lot longer than you think. He's got 26 fights since 2008. Everybody wants to call OSP this prospect and stuff, but he's got more fights than John Jones, and he's 5 years older. So, this is not a prospect versus veteran situation. This is two veterans in the sport. One, you've kind of seen everything that he has to offer when it comes to OSP. And John Jones seems to still be adding things to his game. But,
he's a sponge.
Nobody gets out of this fight game undefeated. And Jones does have his one loss. I still think he takes a loss or two going forward in his career. I don't think it's this weekend. No. I think John Jones wins this fight, beats OSP. The only question is, does he get out of it healthy enough to save the day for UFC 200 with a fight with Daniel Cormier? So that's going to do it. Quick recap of our picks. First fight of the night, Neil and Martin pick Kevin Lee. Chris picks Efren Escudero. Fight number 2, Chris and Martino pick Clint Hester. I pick Peizao, Marcos Rosario de Lima. Martino and Chris have Cody East beating Walt Harris, while I have Harris taking the win in that one. Martino has Glyco Franca beating James Vick, while Chris and I both choose the Texecutioner to win that fight. Juliana Lima is Martino's pick to beat Carla Esparza, while Neil and Chris both have the Cookie Monster winning that fight. We have a handful of unanimous nods for Roberts and Anthony and Sergio Pettis to win their respective fights. We have Yair Rodriguez is the pick of Martin and Neil, while Christopher chooses Andre Feely in that fight. And then the rest of the card, we're all in agreement. We both have Robert Whitaker, Anthony Pettis, Mighty Mouse Johnson, and John Jones winning the final 4 fights on that card. So we're not expecting a whole lot of surprises, to be honest.
Really.
I think we picked a lot of chalk here, but there's going to be some good fights on the card. There's a little dissension in the earlier stuff, but at the end of the day, I think the people who we expect to win should be winning unless something goes crazy.
Something about going crazy.
Yes.
If OSP beats Jones, does that put OSP in the mix with Cormier?
Has to.
Or does Jones still get to fight Cormier?
It has to, because this is for the interim title.
Yeah, this is for the interim title. So the winner, the person who walks away from this gets a strap, and Daniel Cormier's next fight will be against the interim title holder. So either way, Daniel Cormier gets the winner of this fight.
God. So it could be OSP versus Anthony Johnson, or it could be John Jones versus Anthony Johnson. God damn it.
You mean Daniel Cormier?
No, I'm talking about the loser.
Oh, the loser.
The loser.
Okay, yeah, the
To
loser
run
will
up against
probably
Anthony
get
Johnson.
Rumble. Yeah, for sure. So, I don't know if OSP gets Rumble. If OSP loses this fight, he probably stays where he is or drops down from 7 to maybe 10 in the light heavyweight division. So I don't think he's going to get Rumble next if he loses this. But if John Jones loses, I think Rumble would be the next bet for him.
About to say,
So.
Rumble's got a long time to wait now.
All right. Well, that's our picks for this UFC pay-per-view offering.
Yes.
We'll come back at our next podcast and tell you how we did. I hope you enjoyed listening to our breakdowns. If you've got any feedback for us, leave us a note on our Facebook page. That's My Favorite F Words on Facebook, or on our Twitter page,
Yes.
MFFW Podcast. Thanks again. And Chris, you have any final words?
Take care. Good night.
My sentiments.
All right. Y'all have a good one.